Well, everybody, today I'm going to be talking about something that's a little bit of a sensitive topic because in doing this, I'm going to have to talk about people who have gone through, no doubt, very unfortunate situations. I'm not going to speculate on the lives of the people that are going to be discussed in this video, but what I will point out is that their lives and their experiences are knowingly being utilized for propaganda, anti-LGBT propaganda. The people we're going to be talking about today are detransitioners. Now, detransitioning, that is to, maybe like you were younger and you thought that you were trans, so you pursued transitioning from one gender to another, you took hormones or hormone blockers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then down the road, you realized it was a mistake, perhaps, and you decided to, defer from transitioning. At least that is the line of events that conservatives would lead you to believe is the most common. In reality, if we go to academicgroup.com and we go to the what is this? This is a journal of medicine. Here, I can actually go to the JCEM, the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism. We've got a little bit here about detransitioning and the rates of it and the actual merit to the propaganda behind it. And it says as follows. Here, I can just go ahead and show it on screen too. The largest study to look at detransition was the U.S. Transgender Survey from 2015, which was a cross-sectional, non-probability study of 27,715 TGD adults. So it was 27 groups of 715. Transgender? TGD? What does TGD stand for? Transgender? I don't know what the D would stand for. It could be transgender nonconforming or I don't know what the TGD acronym stands for, but it certainly has to do with trans. Transgender dragons, thank you. This survey included the question, have you ever detransitioned? In other words, have you ever gone back to living as your sex assigned at birth, at least for a while? The survey found that 8% of responders had detransitioned temporarily or permanently at some point, and that the majority did so only temporarily. Rates of so most detransitioners detransition only temporarily. Okay. Rates of detransition were higher in transgender women, about 11%, than transgender men at 4%. The most common reasons cited were pressure from a parent at 36%, transitioning was too hard at 33%, too much harassment or discrimination at 31%, and trouble getting a job at 29%. So not only are rates of detransition very low, but the most detransitioners only detransition temporarily. And even still, the rates of detransition were most common reasons cited are pressure from a parent. So not them realizing they made a mistake, but getting pressured by a parent. Transitioning was too hard. So not having access to what they need to transition, they just can't do it. Too much harassment or discrimination, which is literally just transphobes abusing them, and so they can't live a happy life, and trouble getting a job, so getting discriminated against in terms of employment. These are all reasons for detransitioning that have absolutely nothing to do with damn, turns out it was all a mistake, being trans isn't real, it's all rapid onset gender dysphoria, it's all propaganda, it's all made up. However, that is what the right wants you to believe. They want you to believe that gender dysphoria and being trans is just this newfangled thing that's mostly affecting young girls that are becoming trans men at the first sign of tomboyism. And that there is this epidemic of young girls taking testosterone, whether it be because they are being pushed into it by their parents, or because apparently tomboys don't exist anymore, or there's a lot of different reasons they'll list. But All of them are bullshit. The data also overwhelmingly shows that more access to gender-affirming clinics where, guess what, there are experts on gender dysphoria and like all of this stuff, typically more access to that lowers the rate of detransition because there's a higher barrier. There's a much more thorough net of catching, potential like false alarms when it comes to being trans. Like if you've got like parents that are just like, oh, our kid's saying that, that she's trans, she wants hormones, let's buy them. Like instead of that, it's like, okay, let's take our kid to a clinic and, make sure that this is done with the advisement of trained medical professionals that have an entire like ocean of knowledge, peer reviewed and background checked and everything, to back every decision that they make. So with that said, that is not what the right wants. The right wants to weaponize detransitioners, and they do it very often, specifically with trans men that have detransitioned back into women. They love weaponizing them because the current narrative is that there are no such thing as tomboys anymore, and they're all being forced to transition into men at any sign of masculine interest or behavior. So we got a tweet here from Lauren Southern that says, Sarah's detransition story, how the Canadian government pushed her into transitioning as a child, then abandoned her when she changed her mind. Now, Lauren Southern is, of course, a transphobe. That is without any doubt true. And she is, in fact, weaponizing this person's experience, which is not quite as cut and dry as it's made out to be in that tweet, as we're about to see, for political gain, to, rally up hatred for trans people and to justify further taking away the ability for trans people to have access to life-saving medical procedures. As well as even psychiatric care, right? They want to replace like gender affirming clinics and therapists with, conversion therapy, which has been overwhelmingly shown not to work. So, with that said, let's hop into it. Let's see what this, as we will be told, young lady, as she prefers to be referred to, who is detransitioned from being a trans man, has to feel about all this. Let's hear their story. The ending might surprise you.
Now, once you had that feeling of, oh my goodness, like I may have made a mistake, what were the thoughts rushing through your head at that time?
It was a really dark place, and I was kind of just, the one thought was, it's too late to go back, and the guilt of all the people around me that I didn't really give an option to, because I was so sure, like I was sure for years, I was sure after top surgery, and I think in a total I was on testosterone for like 5 years, and top surgery like 4 years after, I was happy. And then all of a sudden these thoughts just started coming, and I didn't know what to do. And I started taking my time to look up the detransition process, and I was surprised that there is no help, or there was no help for my community. And it felt like,
the reason for this, by the way, is because detransition rates are extremely low and dropping as more and more access to gender-affirming care grows. The thing that this video is being used as propaganda to fight for will only result in more detransitioners. It will only result in being trans, taking hormones, getting the surgeries, etc., becoming more of an underground process with less surety, like less what's the word for it? I don't want to say integrity, liability. There's less liability. In the same way that banning abortions will not stop abortions, it will just make them more dangerous and less safe, which just means the same thing. Harder to get and more dangerous and less safe.
You have this community with like open, loving arms, like, we'll accept you, but then sometimes in my case, in D-trans case, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, then you were just a trans trender, or, like push me away. So that's like, in a way,
that love and acceptance disappears as soon as you don't want to be a part of that transition.
So much for the tolerant left.
Exactly.
So in that video, it sounds like pretty compelling, right? Like, oh, damn, that's so heartbreaking. Holy shit. How could the Canadian government do this? How could somebody be forced into such a horrific experience? Well, there was actually a continuation, a post about this particular person and what made them decide to detransition. I believe it was either in a quote tweet or in a reply. I'm going to see if I can try to find it. But it was a post from the person, the person that was being interviewed, about why they detransitioned. And in their story, they talk about how they were very happy as being trans. I'm going to try to find the particular like screenshot so I can read it word for word, but I'll summarize it for now just in case I can't find it. She says that she was happy being trans until, oh, nope, I found it. Here we go. Here we go. Even after the surgery that I didn't have to pay a dime for, even after 5 years of testosterone, I was happy. I worked with an arborist, ran chainsaws, and I looked in the mirror and felt right with the man that I saw, even when it took losing so many people that I'd called friends to get there. Eventually, this all changed, though. It was only in 2022 that I started to question, started to have a hint of doubt, and started to ignore any hint of doubt. One of the biggest reasons being because I believed it was too late. When I decided to go to this church in my hometown, one I'd recently started going to, the pastor spoke of exactly the situation I'd gotten myself into, as though God had decided to reach out. I'd prayed for that guidance. As I was lost on what to do, and if I really could continue on like I was. So clearly there was some doubt already there, but when you start to consider the fact that what really pushed her to detransition was going to a church, and no doubt homophobic church, right? And when you rewatch the particular video again and you hear what she says, there was a particular line there that stood out to me. Let's play this again and I'll point out the line when we hear it.
You had that feeling of, oh my goodness, like I may have made a mistake. What were the thoughts rushing through your head at that time?
It was a really dark place, and I was kind of just, the one thought was, it's too late to go back, and the guilt of all the people around me that I...
All right, here it is. It's too late to go back. And then here's the part I want to point out.
Back, and the guilt of all the people around me that I didn't really give an option to.
The guilt I had for all the people around me that I didn't even give an option to. She's talking about how she felt bad that she became trans and did not allow the other people in her life to have a say in whether or not that was something she should do. That she did not listen to people that said, trans people aren't real. You shouldn't be. Trans people aren't real. This is fake. You're not trans. It stinks of exactly what these stats point to. Rates of detransition were higher in transgender women at 11% than transgender men, obviously referring to a transgender man. The most common reasons cited were pressure from a parent, transitioning being too hard. I don't think that one was a problem. Too much harassment or discrimination, and trouble getting a job. I think that one wasn't too much of an issue either. Clearly, we had pressure from a parent and harassment and discrimination there. If she felt guilt that the people in her life did not get to decide her gender identity for her. And yes, I am using she, her pronouns because that is what she has said she prefers to be used, like referred to her by. If that changes, then I would obviously change what I refer to, but I'm not going to speculate and say, actually, she is trans. She is still a trans man, whether she says it or not. Like, that's not my business to say, but I will say the data heavily suggests that the situation is what it looks like. And that's all I'll say. The next video that's also been going viral on Twitter these last couple days is this one from an individual named KC Miller, who I believe is also a detransitioning trans man as well. Just for some perspective, this is what almost 5 years of hormones does to a teenage girl. Remember, I'm 21. I don't know why they put teenage girl there. 20. I mean, you would have started them at teenage, but you're 21 now. Basically, this is the by hormones. They mean testosterone, the hormone that causes male pattern baldness. So, okay. All right, let's watch the video.
Hey y'all, so I got out of my haircut, because my hair was driving me nuts, and I shaved it because I'm tired of watching my hair thin out, and...
Wait, this person just shaved their hair down to this length to give themselves the Asmongold, like, hairline. You guys know the one. Like, they literally specifically shaved their head to emphasize the Asmongold hairline in this video. What? I don't know. That feels like it's a little bit like you're trying to emphasize a negative effect of hormones for some kind of political gain, it seems. I don't know, maybe. By the way, yeah, testosterone can absolutely have this effect. So for example, if you're like born like assigned female at birth and you have, say, a father who went bald at like 25 or something, and then you turn out to be a trans man and you start taking testosterone, it is very possible you may experience male pattern baldness because you may have the genetics from, you know, the male side of your family to have male pattern baldness. And these things tend to come about. This is one of the things that really supports the idea that trans people are valid, is that when you start taking the hormones of the gender, of the opposite gender you were assigned at birth, you start taking on the traits of the parent of the opposite gender. I've heard trans women say that, like, when they take HRT, usually a good scale to go off of for what their breast size will end up being is their mother's breast size. And I guess in the case of here, if your father has male pattern baldness and you're a trans guy, you might start to experience it. Anyway, get some fucking keeps. If you're a trans guy out there and you're worried about going bald, as if you're just a guy out there, because guess what? It's like 1 in 5 guys experiences male pattern baldness by the time they're 30 or 35 or something. Like, it's actually pretty common. Like, it is not unheard of that this is going to happen to trans men. Yeah, trans men. Some of you are going to go bald. That's a dude thing. Get some keeps, wear a hat, go full bald, like shave your head entirely and just roll with it. I don't know, like, it's gonna happen. Like, dudes lose their hair. That's just a reality of having testosterone pumping through your body.
And it's less distressing if I shave it. So when I talk about being too far gone, I don't really know what else to call it.
Oh, for the record, I should give some lore here. This person is a detransitioner who says they're too far gone. They aren't going to detransition because they think it's too much to detransition. So they're just going to keep on transitioning further while warning everybody of the horrors and the dangers of transitioning, which might be like, I saw somebody quote tweet this and say, being a detransitioner that continues to transition while warning other people of the dangers of transitioning and how being trans is so bad is kind of like a scene in like a comedy sketch movie where the guy says, "Leave me! I'll sacrifice myself on Big Titty MILF Island. Get yourselves to safety." You know, I saw a tweet that was along those lines. I thought that was pretty good. So yeah, that is unironically the context this person operates in. They're continuing to transition despite being a detransitioner, because while still warning everybody of the dangers of transition. Yes, it really does feel like a grifter move.
This is what I mean. This is how deep my voice is. It's gotten deeper over time, and it's settled. This is what I mean by hair loss, and it just keeps getting worse. It keeps thinning. It keeps receding backwards. And I'm not exactly sure that's coming back. Those are the main things when I talk about being androgenized.
There are male pattern baldness remedies. There are plenty of things you can do about this. For one, there are literally surgeries that you can get, or not surgeries, there are literally procedures that you can get that literally like graft hair. Like, they graft hair follicles onto your head. There are procedures you can get you can get a toupee, you can literally get a wig. There's like so many options that you can go to. Hair transplants, like there's so many options. Keeps, like there are I'm pretty sure Rogaine is like effective as fuck, isn't it? Like, won't Rogaine like legitimately like don't use too much? Like, don't use too much and wear gloves. Apparently, like that's what I've heard. It's expensive though, sure, but like this person's transitioning in presumably America. Everybody that I meet on the internet, I assume is American because that's the only real country. So like, yeah, also, yeah, Rogaine works for the back but not the front. Really? I don't know anything about it. What if I want hairy hands? I don't think that would happen though, right? I don't think you can just grow hair follicles, right? I don't know. I don't know how this works. I've always had very thick, lush hair.
To a point of no return. I really don't see those being fixable. So that's when I talk about, just kind of staying how I am, regardless of how I feel. That's why, just because I don't really see me personally being able to come back from what's happened so far. So I hope that's a little explanatory, just to kind of give a little bit more of a, let me reword that, just to kind of, talk about, like, give a more awareness to the situation, kind of, so you can see where I'm at. Words are not working well with me right now. I'm just,
I can tell.
Cut this off. There you go. This is what happens when you give a woman testosterone. This is for 5 years. This is what happens, essentially. So, that's it. Stay safe.
So the ending there really hammers it in that this is somebody who is continuing to transition, obviously. They have gender dysphoria. The alleviation and the cure for that or the treatment for that, I should say, is to transition. And they know that. And they are actively going to continue to transition by the looks of it, but are going to continue to warn the world of the dangers of being trans, and no doubt try to clout farm the right off of the current trend of platforming and trying to essentially like overblow this idea of detransitioners. By the way, the solution to detransitioners being a thing, the way that we improve the margin of error for like diagnosis of gender dysphoria is by making gender affirming clinics more available, more numerous, easier to access. The rate of detransitioning goes down when these things become more available, because the vast majority of detransitioners transitioned, or the ones that detransition and detransition because of reasons that are unrelated to outside stimuli, such as being pressured, out of transition and everything. Usually they're older, like very old, and they started transitioning out of their own volition, like DIY style, without like any like of the modern day medical, psychological, or scientific like pool and body of data that we have now to back up our surety, or how sure we are of a diagnosis of this tier. So what if we made puberty blockers more available so that teenage girls don't go through T? Yeah, so the logic of that entire video can literally be turned around entirely, right? So trans women, like MTF, literally have to deal with that exact same issue if they don't get on HRT. So the argument that this person's trying to make doesn't even work when you apply it to trans women. Like, if you think this is such a big issue, there are trans women who have to deal with that issue because they aren't allowed to transition until they get older, and maybe they have to deal with male pattern baldness before their transition, and yet they still transition. They still get through it, and they're happier for it. The logic just doesn't work. It's very clearly propaganda. These are not people speaking their truths or whatever. These are people that are using, either being used or using their story in order to create propaganda in a time where making this type of propaganda is very profitable. Very, very profitable. Frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if in like the next 6 months we start seeing Blair White talk about how she's gonna how she's a detransitioner, but it's too late for her, so she's not actually going to do anything. But she's just announcing that she's detransitioned. I wouldn't be surprised if she did some shit like that, because that is unironically what the current like grift is. Trying to push the idea that there's an epidemic of adult trans people growing out of it and realizing it was a mistake is absolutely going to be the right's next play. And if you don't believe me, look at my track record when it comes to predicting the right's political moves. That's all I have to say. Anyway, if you enjoyed this segment, please consider leaving a like. It really does help out the channel a lot, whether you're watching this video live or if you're watching it after the fact when it goes up as a segment or if it's just the VOD. Consider dropping a like. It really does help. Hitting that thumbs up button does a lot more than I think you realize. And of course, if you want to support me and see more from me on YouTube, you can subscribe, ring the bell icon, and turn on all notifications so YouTube actually tells you when I go live or I upload a new video. And you can also see more from me on the internet by following my social medias, which are all linked down below in the description, including my Instagram, my Twitter, my TikTok, and of course my fan Discord, where I'm currently trying to get a bunch of people together to build a guild in classic World of Warcraft Wrath of the Lich King. I'm playing on Pagel US as a human warrior on Alliance, so if you want to play with me and join the guild that I'm building, then join my Discord server, hop in the WoW section, make a character in WoW Classic Wrath of the Lich King on Pagel, and yeah, I'm just trying to build a guild, I want to play WoW with people, I'm going to be in the VC all the time talking to people. I'll help people level, and we'll raid together and do dungeons together. It'll just be a fun time. I want to spend more time with my community in Discord, so make sure to join that. And of course, finally, if you want to support me financially and you've got the money for it and you don't need it for anything else, you can always do exactly that by supporting me over on my website in the form of a donation, a sub, or a gifted sub, or you can support me through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, or through Patreon, but only if you've got the money for it and you don't need it for anything else. With all that said, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.